The adage, "debt is the source of all evils," may be familiar to you. Never ever take on debt. Debt is slavery. And to some extent, that is accurate since your life is ruined when you are drowning in debt. Your debts are not waiting for you to pay them off while you're attempting to. As no one lends money for free, they are expanding daily, and interest exists at all times. Despite all of this, the United States has accepted that the average household now owes more than $96,371 in debt, with the total amount of consumer debt in the country hovering at $16.9 trillion. The US economy as a whole is estimated to be worth little more than $23.32 trillion in GDP. But there are some welcome news to share. Not everything is a terrible thing. Due to the fact that the majority of our debt is bad debt, that opinion is not widely held. You probably owe money on credit cards, have a vehicle loan, and may even have school loan debt. You may be thinking, paying off all of these bills will take decades. How in the world is it a good thing? Let's look at how people with large finances still use that to make even more money to see how that may be something positive. It could sound a little perplexing since, in the first place, why would someone with a lot of money use debts? It is supposed to be used by those without money, but capitalism doesn't operate like that. When used properly, that is a strong tool. You may learn how wealthy people use that in this video to generate even more income. Give it a thumbs up, and then let's start with number 1. Number 1. Debt underpins the majority of trade. It may sound a little contentious because it is a terrible idea to borrow money to launch a business. Although I personally would never use such strategy, there are some firms, particularly traditional ones, where it is the ideal choice. Say you want to market pens. It's a relatively typical product, and there is almost always a market for it. In an ideal world, you would take a plane to China and locate a plant that makes that kind of pen at a reasonable cost. Formerly, you would buy a container of pens, transport them to the United States, and then distribute them to your customers. Today, however, most of this is done online through companies like Alibaba, unless it's a more involved product, in which case you must travel to the manufacturer. So here's the problem. To get the thing first, you don't actually need to pay for it. I'll tell you how. China has transformed into the world's factory in the last 50 years, producing practically everything. Millions of factories continuously generate everything the world requires. Also, most of these factories would be happy to lend you their goods so that you could sell them more easily in exchange for a future payment. You must first establish some kind of confidence with them because they would not lend to strangers. But for the past 50 years, it has been how business has operated. Once the product is sold in the US or elsewhere in the world, the client pays the plant and borrows additional goods. Essentially, you are asking the factory, "Do you know how to make it? So please allow me to aid in the sales. That will be my profit for anything above this price." This method is excellent because you are not investing your personal money in this transaction. Selling is therefore one of the most important talents you can learn. Number 2. Refinancing. Because of its many exceptions, real estate debt is the best sort of debt. You are paying more taxes if you don't have a mortgage. To be able to take advantage of all those deductions, wealthy people frequently have numerous mortgages. Keep in mind that every dollar you avoid paying in taxes, but make instead is an additional dollar. So that's another way wealthy people accumulate wealth. So allow me to offer you a more useful approach. This is essentially how wealthy individuals become wealthy in real estate. Say you have $200,000 in savings. Although that sum of money seems large, it is actually peanuts and cannot even be used to purchase a home. If you have a 20% down payment, you obviously cannot receive a mortgage up to $800,000, but there's a trick. Let's imagine you discover a property that costs $500,000 to buy. It requires some, possibly a lot, of renovations because it is in poor shape. You go to a bank and pay a 20% down payment to obtain a mortgage. Let's assume that your renovation budget will be $50,000, or around 10% of the home's overall cost. You visit your bank once more, but this time, you want to refinance your home loan. That property was worth only $500,000 when you obtained your first mortgage because no one wanted to live there due to its terrible condition. But since you renovated it, more individuals are now interested in renting it out. The property's market value, let's say, increases to $700,000. Let's say, like the first time, you're going to get a mortgage at 80%, but 80% out of $700,000 is $560,000. The first bank that provided you with the first mortgage will receive $400,000 of that money. Even if we exclude the additional $50,000 you spent on renovations, you'll still have a profit of $110,000. You made $110,000 with that, and now you have a house you can rent out to increase your equity and get passive income. Also, since you have a mortgage, you will be exempt from paying taxes. Real estate investors frequently engage in this activity. After this, can you actually see that something is bad? I'll let you respond to that in the comment section below. Number 3. Hedge funds. Hedge funds are created by the wealthy for the wealthy to make the wealthy even richer, and they typically employ unpopular tactics. Mortals like you and I do our best to anticipate which firms will develop and increase in value, and we spend the money we have worked so hard to earn in the hopes that these companies will grow, but hedge funds frequently adopt an entirely different approach. When businesses fail or go bankrupt, as it did in the instance of GameStop, they attempt to profit. But in that instance, the internet tested hedge funds, causing them to lose more than $13 billion. However, how do hedge funds generate income from debt? Let's say you predict that a particular stock will fall, like Facebook, because you know that the most popular smartphone manufacturer, Apple, will announce next week that it will no longer allow apps to track you, like Facebook or Instagram, to track your online activity and will put privacy first, which will seriously harm Facebook's business model. So you pick up the phone and dial your broker in order to borrow from him a single share of Facebook stock that costs, say, $100 and immediately sell it for $100 on the open market. Congrats! You now have $100 in your pocket, but your broker is still owed one Facebook stock. Let's assume you're correct and Facebook's stock price drops to $70 the next week. You spend that $100 to purchase one Facebook share at a discounted price of $70, return the stock to your broker, and keep the difference. With the complete stock, you have profited $30. Whilst it appears straightforward in theory, doing it well is quite hazardous and complicated. What occurs if you are mistaken? What if the cost increases by 50% tomorrow? You still need to pay interest for borrowing that one Facebook stock and return it to your broker. To give that stock back to your broker, you must now pay $200. The amount you invested is the most you can lose when you buy a stock and try to sell it when it increases, not when you short it. Your losses increase as the price rises. If the stock price might possibly increase eternally, you could theoretically sustain a limitless amount of losses. But if you have 100 analysts working for you, this tactic can earn you a lot. Number 4. Forex. Currency exchange takes place in the Forex market. International trade is made feasible through it. In China, you can use dollars. To pay your staff, for instance, you would have to purchase Chinese yen in China. There is a market where anyone or any business can go to buy foreign currency. These currencies also change based on many considerations. For instance, if the Fed increases interest rates, it will reduce the amount of dollars available on the market, strengthening the dollar's position against other currencies, or vice versa. Therefore, you may make a lot of money in this market if you can forecast which currencies will increase or decrease. But what sets these markets apart from the rest is that you can borrow an additional $100 for every dollar you use to trade in Forex. This implies that if you trade using your $1,000, you can hold a position of $100,000. Even a tiny profit of 1% would be significant. Number 5. Credit score. You can see what a strong tool that is. Every successful firm or business person makes advantage of that in a variety of ways, particularly if you have a tested business strategy. Practically every business uses borrowing to finance purchase orders. Of course, debts with a high interest rate, such as credit card debts, are terrible, so stop thinking in terms of everything that is evil. Yet, you must reduce the risks associated with lending you money in order to receive a reduced interest rate. How do you go about that? You establish a reputation for being a trustworthy borrower. Trillions of dollars, if not more, are sitting in banks ready to be borrowed. Moreover, banks have the ability to produce money out of thin air even when there is none. Give this video a thumbs up if you found it informative. Furthermore, subscribe and enable your notifications if you're new around here. This has been YT Pioneers. I appreciate your interest and hope to see you in the next video.